Hello, how are you?
I'm dandy. How are you, Miss Angie?
Great. So, for the people joining us, I'm super excited to talk to you today. It's kind of
Thank
been
you.
a play with timing and schedule, then I got horribly sick, and it's been like a back and forth. But we are presenting this issue specifically on shamanism, and I wanted to introduce you. You wrote an awesome article, which absolutely love it, and it's going to go along with this video. But I want to introduce the people not only to the author behind it, but to you specifically. So,
Okay.
Ms. Cricket, can you tell us a little bit about um, where, how it got, how really, I can't even talk, how shamanism came about to your life? I know you have like 25 years of experience. Can you just rattle us down a little bit into how this all came about?
Sure. I was introduced to shamanism or a drumming circle from a friend of mine who literally said, I came across something really weird and I think it'd be right up your alley. That's almost verbatim. And so, of course, it piqued my curiosity. And I said, what is this? And I went to a drumming circle. It was actually hosted in the basement of a minimum security prison. So we were in a really unique place. Anyway, that was the first of it. The first time I ever discovered journey work, I felt like I had come home. I had been attracted to nature, attracted to visualization, and already out of body experiences. But when I was introduced to the drum as a form of shamanic journey work or a form of connecting with spirit, it was like as though I had found, my other side of myself or my intuitive side of myself. So it became a process of self-discovery, self-awareness, and it had so many component parts to it. In the end, like 25 years later, I can see all the component parts. But during the beginning, it was just a very unique exploration of soul, something I had never really done in that capacity before.
Okay.
The other thing that I love is that in 25 years, I've never been bored. And I can't say that about very many other things. So I would never trade it for the world in that regard. And the curiosity kept me reading. So I studied a lot of anthropology and I studied depth psychology. I studied Carl Jung, Joseph Campbell, Marion Woodman, to name a few, just to attempt to understand what the modern language would be to a traditional or an ancestral practice. It's one thing to practice something, it's another thing to coordinate a language to express yourself and be understood and received by people in the 21st century.
And especially with a topic like this.
Yes. And there are many misconceptions about shamanism. The main misconception I deal with living in Northern Canada is that people automatically associate the word shamanism with First Nations traditions, which it isn't First Nations traditions. And the word shaman in and of itself is a Tungus word meaning one who knows. So the people who were trying to find similarities in different traditional practices in the Victorian area took on the word shaman and then applied it globally to people who maintained a certain set of practices within. And then there is the Foundation for Shamanic Studies, which is out of, I think it's out of California.
Okay.
And that is core shamanism, which can also be referred to as neo-shamanism. So it's not traditional. And there's no cultural appropriation in the core shamanic techniques taught. So that's what makes it rather universal. And that is also the birth of neo-shamanism or modern shamanism within the North American culture, and mostly be traced back to the Foundation for Shamanic Studies and their training. I mean, you can go a whole lot deeper than what they train, but it's a great starting point.
I think I'm going to look that up. Okay. I wrote it down. Okay. And it's interesting. So if the word shaman means to know, and let's take it to kind of a basic level, it's to know what? Like, what's the idea behind what is it that this person, quote unquote, knows?
Isn't that, I think that's a great question for the very simple reason that, Angie, what you want to know and what I want to know might be two entirely different things.
That's what I thought.
And yeah, one of the benefits of the shamanic journey work is that it's as individual as you and I. So for one who knows, so for me, I want to know, how may I help the land, or how may I understand or have a better relationship to animals in my world, or to nature in my world, or to spirit in my world. And so the practice of someone who knows simply translates into one who receives messages from the spirits and then translates it to the rest of the group. With modern shamanism, you don't have to be the sole receiver for the group. In this case, the group has the opportunity and the ability to gather information on their own. So what you want to know and what I want to know may be very different, but we can approach it using the same technique. Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay. Okay. And now that we're talking about the group, that's kind of what I'm thinking about now. So what do you mean by what the group wants to know and what you want to know? Is it kind of like set up as a group practice always, or can it be an individual practice?
I think the primary way of practicing is individual. I know that there are many places in Canada and probably in the US as well that don't have drumming circles. It takes a lot of commitment for someone to come forward and to offer space or organize something on a monthly basis, a bi-weekly basis, or a weekly basis. So for me, I started practicing in a group. So in my language, I would always say group because I've run drumming circles for so many years and was a part of drumming circles for so many years. So that's part of my vernacular. But most people that I work with and that I speak to are very solitary practitioners. And shamanism can be a very individualistic and solitary practice. So for most people, Angie, they're going to do it individually and in their own home, or perhaps in nature, however they're going to pursue it. Most people don't have the opportunity to have a consistent group meeting.
Okay. And what exactly is it that they practice? For example, let's say somebody that's doing it at home. What exactly, I don't know how to say this, a ritual, a practice, what is it that they do? Or what can you do to practice shamanism? Might be a better question.
I think that's a perfect question. And there's so many other aspects or alternatives to that. But let me start with the first thing that we do. The first thing that most people would do on their own would be to practice the shamanic drumming, or getting in touch with their own spirits. And the way that they would do that would be through the journey. There are ceremonies and there are rituals. In my world, those are two very different things.
Okay.
So a ceremony would be akin to a wedding, where you have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and that is a ceremony. And there are many shamanic ceremonies. There are ceremonies of fire, there are ceremonies for water. A ritual is a different event. So we have a beginning, we have a middle, but we don't know how it's going to end. And that, for me, is a demarcation between the word ritual and ceremony. And other people will argue and say that they're the same thing, but that's just simply my interpretation. So as a practice, for myself individually, if I'm going to do this on my own, in my own space, I always light a candle because that's very important to me. I always light smudge, which is also very important to me. I am practiced enough that I can drum for myself and journey for myself, but I prefer to use drumming recordings that I've made with other people from my circle. I like to use those. They're very deep, and they get me very deep. Other people will practice using the medicine wheel, how they can interpret their life or move their life around using the medicine wheel. And the medicine wheel is indicative mostly to North American culture, but there's the hoop, there's the sacred hoop, there's the reed circle. There are different forms of medicine wheels. So the medicine wheel is one aspect. It's not shamanic per se, but it has roots in practices that allow you to explore the universe from different directions in different ways. So there's that. So we have people who practice individually. They would practice their journey skills. They would practice their own rituals or their own ceremonies to relate to whatever they're dealing with. There's also healing work that can be done. So there is physical healing, there's emotional healing, psychological healing. That can be done in ceremony, as well as that can be done in journey, and that can also be done in groups. So those are some of the very basic things that a person individually would start off with. self-exploration, I think, is really undervalued. And I don't know that there are a lot of people who necessarily have the tools or the ability to do that type of work. Hence why I like the drum.
Okay. My mind is going everywhere. I hope you know. Okay. So one of my arrows that's pointing, when we talk about drumming,
Yeah.
I've listened to drums, I've gone to drumming circles. For the people who haven't been to a drumming circle, what exactly are you referring to, quote unquote, a drumming circle, and what happens at a drumming circle? Because I was speaking to somebody not long ago, and to them, this was, besides it being weird, it was more of a, well, what happens there? I mean, I'm kind of scared to go, what's going to happen there? Because what? So can you explain a little? I know that they're all probably a little bit different, right?
I can describe what I would do, but first I want to say that there are there are many different types of circles, drumming circles, but there are two very specific that most people come into mind with. The first is a drumming circle where it would be a community drum circle, so people would get together with the intention of creating percussion or percussion sound or percussion music. So there is that type of drumming circle, and that's more for the expression of drum, the expression of soul, the expression of sound, for dancing, that sort of thing. Now, in the other case, with respect to a drumming circle, the way that I ran a drumming circle was I would have a lesson plan for every single circle. And that from there, it would be a lesson either in the middle world, the lower world, the upper world, whatever that lesson was. And then from there, after explaining it, I would take my smudge and smudge each person in the room. And then we would call in the directions, including north, south, east, west, and the upper world, the lower world. And then everybody picks up their drums and their rattles, and we go for a lovely cacophony of sound. So that's bringing up your own spirit. As the seventh direction is you. You're the middle world, you're the spirit. So by using our drums and our rattles, then we bring in our own spirit song, we raise our own energy, and we connect with that percussive sound. Then what happens is, based on whatever lesson that I had for that particular day, there would be 2 journeys and sometimes 3 journeys. So you would do a journey to this question or a journey to that question. As an example, if we were doing a lesson on urban shamanism, where can you find fire in an urban setting? Well, you could journey to an electrical wire and feel what fire feels like in that form. You could journey to the furnace in your house. That is also a form of fire in an urban setting. If you want to journey to ground, you can journey on the sidewalks. Where do the sidewalks take you? So there are many different ways of accessing yourself in a drumming circle, but that's the intention from my perspective. And what I always did with drumming circles was they were always learning oriented and experientially orientated, not specifically intellectually orientated.
I think I'm gonna have to get on a plane and fly to Canada to one of your drumming circles.
You would be more than welcome.
Okay, so journeying. We keep talking about it. Can you explain in layman's terms? Because to tell somebody you're gonna journey into the electrical socket to know what fire feels like, that goes over their head. So
it does. And you speak a language that most people don't speak, and you get the sideways glance. And I've had one, maybe 2,000 sideways glances in my life, you know. Journey work is very, it is a trance-induced state. The trance-induced state is because of the percussive driven or the sound driven movement in the brain. So there are, I don't want to get too technical, but basically what it does is it affects one of the brain waves. It slows the brain wave down. The particular brain wave that it slows down allows you to perceive what we call as non-ordinary reality or shamanic reality or shamanic consciousness. So the sound of the rhythm of the drum, for me, because it's between 180 or 220 beats per minute, and it is, for all intents and purposes, a very boring beat. And the reason that it is boring is so that we don't engage the conscious mind. Because if we start playing rhythms and sound, then your brain's going to go off on this direction and that direction. But if we have candy for the conscious mind, what it does is it allows the opportunity for that personal unconscious or the subconscious to release itself from the confines of the conscious mind, because the conscious mind really has a tight grip on us. So if we can focus that conscious mind somewhere else, then we allow that imaginative realm, that active imagination, which is the beginning part of journeys, to open up and to allow us access into other realms, other worlds, other levels of experiencing spirit. Basically, that's it in a nutshell. And I haven't met anyone who couldn't journey. Well, okay, 2 people in 25 years I've met couldn't journey. And oftentimes it's because we have the disease of the monkey mind. And we have so many, we live in a dial-a-day reality, right? And we can change the channel at any point in time. We can shut down a web browser at any point in time. We can change subjects at any point in time. So it's very challenging for some people to shut off the monkey mind. So the shamanic journey, I think, can be easier to achieve than meditation, for the very simple reason that it doesn't require you to quiet the mind. It just requires you to actively engage the conscious mind, so the back of you can get the hell out of and figure out what else is going on. That's it in a nutshell.
I like that. Okay. So there's different traditions of shamanism.
Very much.
And I'm Colombian.
Yeah.
The shamanism that I've experienced, quote unquote, has been Peruvian.
Right.
So I'm gonna kind of go deep end here because I want your opinion on something that nobody knows but my sister. And now we're recording this, so interesting. That's why I'm laughing here. Okay. So 6 years ago, actually June, 6 years ago, we went to Peru on a mystical retreat with a group of spiritual people, blah, 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 blah. And it was amazing. We went to Lake Titicaca. We went, to all these different places. And I think there's a place called Cusco. We met a shaman in his space. We met like 2 or 3, but this one in particular, he had a little, store that he sold things. And so obviously being in Peru and being so high up, ever since I got there, we had to drink the tea of
cocoa leaves.
There we go. Yeah. So we were drinking that and I was like, oh, okay, fine. We went into this place. I'm going to try to say it fast so we can get to it, but it was a really small place. There was like 20 of us. It was a really small place and we all kind of sat in a circle. And I remember we closed our eyes, the music started. I believe there was a recording of some kind, but I know for sure he was drumming as well because I saw him, I saw the drums, I heard it, and you can tell the difference between the background, but it was nice. It was like a nice thing going on. Obviously with this group of 20 people, we were all connected. It was very spiritual. I connected like that. All of a sudden, I didn't open my eyes because I was scared. All of a sudden, I felt wings like of an eagle, or I have no idea what, but it was huge. And I felt them in front of me and they were like flap. And I was like, I'm not opening my eyes because if there's something here that big, I'm going to freak out. So I was like, okay, fine. I kept my eyes closed. Then I heard this, so many different things, but I was like, okay, fine. Now here's the part that nobody knows. So I have my eyes closed and I don't think I'm journeying. I think I'm like way off journeying. Like I'm experiencing totally different things. I know I wasn't here. And then I get this vision at the same time. So the first vision, I don't remember it right now exactly. I think I was an eagle and I was soaring and I could see, like literally an eagle would see the mountains. And I mean, it was awesome. But at the same time, I was having a vision more than just triple X, okay? This very tantric vision of one of the people that was there with me, one of the guys that was there with me, and myself. And I was like, oh my God, why am I seeing this? And with him, like, oh, no, I'm on my journey. Let me get back to my eagle. So I was like, no. So I had to focus back on the eagle. And again, I'm flying, but it was happening at the same time. But it was 2 completely different visions. In my words, I call the energy, the chakra system and the whole thing, I know that, you know, the whole energy came up, and I mean, I don't know. In human terms, I could have had the best orgasm of my life with that vision because of what was happening. But then my thing is, was it because of the tea that I was drinking? Was it something that he burned there? Is it possible to have two journeys like that, so completely radical, and one so amazingly triple X? I mean, and nobody knows this, and I didn't even tell my sister. My sister was with me. I didn't even tell her until we were on the plane flying back, and it was still like 5 days out. And when I got on the plane, I told her, and I was like, I didn't want to say anything because I felt weird with the guy, you know, after that. But I kept laughing inside because I was like, well, you and me, just, you don't want to know what we did. But is that normal? Can that, I mean, I know it can happen because it happened to me, but why would I have two journeying things so radically different at the same time? I never thought that could happen. Does that make sense?
I don't know if specifically the cocoa tea is going to modify any of the brain chemistry unless he gave you very specific tea. So you may have drank something different, but it doesn't sound like it.
I don't know.
I didn't find any psychotropic or mind-altering experiences just drinking the cocoa tea, for simple reason that it's used for, you know, obviously the altitude sickness, right, and the altitude headaches, which are just can be brutal. Now I want to get to your two experiences at the same time. I find that very fascinating. And is it common? Absolutely not in my experience. I don't have an exact interpretation, Angie, because obviously I wasn't there. But I can give you a rough guess as to how the brain can do that, or how the brain can operate on that. One of the interesting aspects of shamanic journey work versus other types of trance work is that you have the ability to be in two worlds at the same time. So you have one world in the physical, one foot in the spiritual. In your case, you were experiencing a spiritual experience based in the physical reality. Hence the individual who was there in the ceremony with you, in the drum with you. And so whatever reason, the root and the second chakra were very activated within that. I have had very sexual experiences in my journeys, and they truly are set out from anything that I've experienced in reality. Doesn't mean one is better, one is worse, but they are not at all comparable. Right. And then to have that flight with the eagle or the condor, whatever it is that you were flying with, think about the two aspects and how those are similar. So we have an aspect of Tantra that makes you flying on the inside, flying into that space of orgasm, flying into ecstasy. And then on the other side, the spiritual side is literally lifting you up out of the physical so that you can have that transcendent experience. So the two of them work together in consort, I think, to raise the vibrations of both aspects of you. So having both experiences, consider yourself lucky. I would have felt a little awkward with the other human being. But if you had more bravery, or you were in a more intimate, meaning emotionally intimate setting with that group, he may have been experiencing something very similar and also felt too shy or too embarrassed to talk to you. That would be the only way that I think I could interpret that or put that together. But I find both of them, you know, one we're dealing with the 6th and 7th chakras, and then the other one we're dealing with the 3rd, 2nd, and 1st chakras. So we have that motion and that movement. And what are you going to pay attention to, right? You're going to pay attention to both, how you're physically feeling and how you're spiritually feeling, and reminding you that the two are one and the same. We cannot separate one without the other.
Wow. Okay.
It's an interesting experience you had.
And like I said, nobody had known this. I hadn't talked about it with anybody, and I just talked about it with my sister, and she was there. And I laughed because I said the only reason I can figure out why this happened is just because I go there and my mind went there, and I just, you know, brushed it away like that was a fun experience. But what you just talked about makes total sense. Total sense, because yes, and as you were just describing it, I could kind of answers back my question to what is it that we know that I asked you
Mhm.
before. I just got a knowing that, yeah, they were giving me a vision in order for me to literally raise my energy in a way that I would feel it. And I definitely did, while I was still viewing something else that it really had nothing to do with anything. But now I'm curious if he ever did feel or see, or now I'm really curious, but there's no way of me knowing now. But that is
No.
that is very, very interesting, because I
Mhm.
know when we did share, obviously I didn't share that part, but when we did share our journeys, a lot of us saw each other in our journey. A lot of us really said you were there and you were there and you were, and I remember that. I remember that. But my mind went to that other one, so I was like, yeah, I'm not commenting much just in case something slips out.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Super interesting. Now,
And it's not just for a sec, it's not uncommon in a group setting to see each other in the journeys, to have very similar experiences, to have the same auditory hallucinations, to have the same visions. Like 15 out of 20 people could have experienced water. 10 people out of 20 could have experienced a mountain. 13 out of 20 could, that sort of thing. It's not uncommon to have a mind meld like that at all.
can I ask why? I think I
I
know.
think from my perspective, because we are all gathering in the same spot, whether we're all having an individual experience or not is irrelevant. What is relevant is that we're all in the same bowl. We're all in that spiritual place. We're all in that spiritual reality, all at the same time. And there may have been some intimacy relating between you within that group. So there's that soul connection. So when we have a heart to heart or a soul to soul connection, we're far more likely to see that individual in the journey than if we don't have a soul connection, unless we pull that person's energy or pull that person's spirit into the journey with us. But it's that group consciousness. It's that group reality. And so when you see consistencies like that, for me, it is simply saying, oh my, look, we really are all connected. We really are having one experience with an individual perception.
Right. Well, you described it perfectly, because that's what I was thinking. Since we're all one and we're all doing it at the same time, thinking about it that way, it's more than logical for us to view in one way or another the same thing.
I think so.
But I
I
never
think
thought
so
that
very
he
much.
would have visioned what I did. Okay. Anyways, um, okay. Let's go back to just real quickly. I
Mhm.
wanted to ask you the breathing.
Mhm.
Is the breathing exercises, the breathing techniques, is that part of a practice that you would consider something that you would do under shamanism with the drumming, or is that just kind of an add-on? And the reason I'm
Well,
asking is because I have several, breath workshops that I've done, and I help facilitate one of them and the whole thing, but we would always play drumming music in the back. But I've never really understood if it's part of the practice or it was just, an enhancer.
I find I haven't found, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but I haven't found a particular shamanic tradition that includes a lot of breath work. If we're doing it in the breath work, we're dealing more with different traditions.
Oh, okay.
I, however, strongly use breath work in my work. I use breath work, the alternate nostril breath to balance the right and left side of the brain. I will do, in Stanislav Grof, Stan Grof, the holotropic breath work takes you into very similar experiences as the shamanic journey work does, or as the drum does. The drum, I think, is that backbeat that helps to focus that conscious mind, get that conscious mind out of the way. Breath work is so essential because the only place we can be when we're breathing is in our body, when we focus on our body. So lots of times when I want to bring people into a sacred space or that recognition of sacred space, I get them to breathe first, because we are more likely to journey out of our body if we start connected to our body. And we are not in Canada, North America. I think that we negate the value of breath. We negate the value of breath work. We negate the value of that connection between breath and self, or breath and body, or breath and spirit. So I don't think it's taught specifically in any form of shamanism I've studied, but I've incorporated it because I've done 30 years of yoga. So for me, it's very important to integrate it. I find them so helpful to each other. They're like partners.
Okay. And that makes total sense, because that's exactly the holotropic breath. Those were the workshops that we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And it what you're talking about now, the drumming, I think it enhanced it, but I think it was because I wasn't paying attention. It helped me really get into my body because of the breath, and my mind was distracted with the music, and it kind of just soothed in. But I've had some amazing experiences with that. I mean, that's completely, and it's unbelievable. It's what I don't remember who said it, but somebody said, if people would understand the power of breath, there'd be so many illnesses that would go away. And even me knowing that, and I'll be 100% honest, even me knowing that, I catch myself sometimes literally not breathing. Like all of a sudden I'm like,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh my God, and it's not like I'm holding my breath for a long time, but I notice it. And right there, I'm like, not only was I in my head and God knows where, I wasn't even like so consciously not in my body. I need to see what's going on. And it's always leads me to something. But it's if so many people would know, and I think that's the reason I spoke to you before we got on the call, that I'm changing the mission of the magazine, and I want to focus it more on topics like this. Because I think if so many more people knew how easy it is to learn how to breathe for themselves, their lives would be happier, their lives would be healthier. It's
Yeah.
such a different experience that a lot of people don't know how easy and how important it is. We just take it for granted. We just literally take it for granted. And that's exactly the mission that I'm on, that it's all these topics and all these conversations. I want people to know that this stuff exists. And with the shamanism, I want them to know it's not something scary, because a lot of people think shamanism, it's like, this crazy person in the woods with, the long gray hair talking to animals and God knows what, and, killing this. And it's not that at all. It's just
No.
such a totally different way from the way we think and our reality and our society. But the ancients did this for so long. There's nothing new age about this. It's literally science in a way that our science modern world doesn't comprehend, but it's so radical for us.
Yeah. I absolutely agree with you. And I think if people truly did understand the value and the benefits of breath, and I'm with you. I remember the first time I discovered breath work, and I remember the first time I discovered that I only was breathing in the top third of my lungs, and how we are challenged in this culture to stay present and stay with the breath, or stay in the breath. And when you say to people, just stay in your breath, you get, one of those sideways glances and a bit of an eye roll. I've had an eye roll more than one time. Oh yeah, stay with the breath. I've heard that before. But it's like, you know what? If you'd stay with your breath, I wouldn't have to tell you 10 times. Now would I?
Right.
So, but I think it is an added benefit to it, number one. And I think that it is just, we wouldn't have pranayama if we didn't have the prana breath or the breath work, or we wouldn't have books written by our ancestors and our elders if breath wasn't important. And even the sound or breath, when we talk about different traditions, it even talks about breath and sound as being the beginning. Even in the Bible, it talks about, and God spoke, and therefore there was the earth, or Krishna breathed out, and there was the earth. So there are traditions that speak about, we spoke ourselves into being, we sang ourselves into being. So there is definitely an ancestral lineage that connects spirit to breath, and spirit to, or breath to spirits per se.
Sorry, and it's so fascinating. I mean, all of the different traditions, and you just called it right out. All the different traditions, all the different religions, they could say it in many different ways, but the information is there.
Mm-hmm.
Just a matter of, and I think it gets to a point, like you just said, if you wouldn't stop breathing, and I wouldn't have to remind you 10,000 times to breathe, it's the same thing with everything. I think there's so many signs in the world, and there's so many religions, and there's so many beliefs, and there's so, when we really narrow it down and really compare, it's all saying the same thing in a different way. And yet 90% of the people in this world still don't get it or don't want to
Mm-hmm.
get it. And it comes to a point that it's like, if you don't want to understand, that's on you. What I consider important is letting you know it's there.
Yeah.
You know it's there, then it's your responsibility. You do what you want. But I think a lot of people don't understand it because not enough of us are talking about it, or at least not making a big noise about it.
Yeah, that's valid. Totally valid. I agree 100%.
Okay, cool. So that's why we're talking about this.
Exactly, right? Exactly.
Thank you so much. If people want to learn more, how do they find you? How do they reach out to you? Which ways can they get in touch with you?
There, I have Shaman's Way with an apostrophe on Facebook. I also have a website, shamansway, one word.net. And on there are 5 different learning modules. There are free drumming tracks. And to get a hold of me personally, you can either message me through Facebook, you can message me through Shaman's Way, and those are the two best ways to get a hold of me. I'm not always the 100% best on responding within that immediacy that we expect in our day-to-day reality. So I do request patience. Sometimes it'll take me a few days. So that's the easiest way to get a hold of me. And I like that. I like answering questions. I like figuring out what people need or want. I also have a library, I think now, of 92 podcasts on Shaman's Way, as well as we're in the process of creating a video class. I don't have any classes listed on my website because right now they're in development. I have all the curriculum written. It's just a matter of finding time to do the actual videos themselves. And so those are the two best ways. Facebook or through my website are the two best ways to get a hold of me.
Okay, perfect. And I did go through your Facebook.
Thank you.
The stuff that you write is amazing. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to reach out to you. And again, I'm trying to bring a lot more of this information out. What I just said 5 minutes ago, rambled on. I want to get more information out, yet I'm very selective in who I talk to. Because a lot of people that aren't in our world, that don't think the way that we think, that they haven't gone down the rabbit hole, if I present to them somebody with crazy ideas that doesn't vibe with me, doesn't explain well, it's not going to be beneficial for any of us. But I did go through your Facebook. I did go through your website as well. But I
Thank
went through
you.
your Facebook and I read so many different comments. And I'll be completely honest. Not only did I like what you wrote, but from the feedback and the engagement of the people that were responding to you, you can feel that connection. And I think that's what's important. If you're going to reach out to somebody, to see that that person is what they are, because you could see it through, unfortunately, the social proof of the people that are communicating, but you can feel that interaction. And that's one of the reasons that I did reach out to you. I hadn't told you
Thank
that.
you.
See?
Thank you. Thank you.
So in other words, I spied on your page before reaching out to you.
I think a little detective work is always necessary, right? You don't know who you're going to run into.
Yeah, you don't know. And it was fun because you get to read and learn and and I've seen some people that I'm like, yeah, that sounds interesting, but we'll leave that one for later. That's like way out there.
Yes. I'm just going to briefly say this because I know we're wrapping up, but in Canadian statistics, they did in the latest survey that you can go through, the people who classify their spiritual pursuits as other, which is what we would fall into, is 0.6%. So I always tell my students how incredibly awesome we are because we fall in the 0.6 category. And so if someone is out there, we are on the edge with them. And I actually really quite like that. I think being a 0.6 makes me feel, kind of all right by that.
We have a category of our own.
Right?
That's super cool. That's super cool. Well, thank you so much for this. It's been a blast.
My pleasure.
After
Thank you for your time.
my Peruvian journey experience, I got an answer. twice because I got one from you last time as well.
Nice.
See, a lot of
And
things
it has
happen on
been
that
a
trip.
true pleasure. It's been a true pleasure to meet you, to chat with you. And I'm so appreciative of you reaching out and tapping me on the shoulder and asking me to submit an article and to speak with you. It really makes my heart warm. And I don't know if you can tell, but I have a true passion for teaching. I have a true passion for shamanism. And I just want people to know that it isn't scary and that it is a really invaluable tool for exploration.
It is. No, beautiful, beautiful. And I really want them to reach out to you. Like I said, it's, you can tell that you definitely can tell that it's your passion because it comes out so naturally. And you have a way of describing things that a perfect teacher would do to any student because you can relate to what it is that you're saying. So, not to put any pressure on you, but get those classes on, get those videos on, because I think it's very, very valuable. And if you need a platform, just let me know. That's what we're here for.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you. I look forward to it.
Thank you, Han. Talk to you later.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye-bye.